was at the Bridgestone Arena recently, and Josh Groban was there, and it took them too long to get their sound right. You should come down and work in Nashville. Talking about children, why do we have children? I'm leaping into this because we only have a couple of short sessions today. And so I'm going to fly over this at 20,000 feet and talk quickly, all right? And as some of you already know, if you email me, I do respond if I'm in country. Sometimes it takes me a week or so if I'm not able to get to email. But as a rule, we'll work on it. Why do we have kids? We have a strong sex drive. Why do we have a strong sex drive? So that we will have kids. Why do we have a strong maternity clock? So that we will have kids. Why do we have kids? I mean, this is a biological question, but it's also a spiritual one. And if your first response is, well, duh, we wanted to have kids, you're not paying attention. The first kid, I can understand why you would feel that about the first kid. Really. But then there's all that pain and aggravation and extra expense and lack of sleep, and you do it again. Why do we have kids? Now, that actually is a whole day seminar when we work with psych students and grad students. But I'm going to just put it to you this way. God has a plan for the kids. Well, the devil does too, but let's just pull back. God has a plan for the kids. God does not plan for the kids to be you. These children will be someone else. I look at my grands, and people will say, oh, my goodness, we look at Fenn, and we see you. Or we look at Ollie, and we see you. And I'm going, I just smile. I don't correct them. The fact is, they're going to be very different from me. And that's important. And that's important in your churches as well. We were talking about this just before we got started. Kids are leaving churches by leaps and bounds. There are a lot of reasons for this. Our children are in danger, and there are a lot of reasons for this. But we have to start with you, parents. You are raising a child to be used in the service of Jesus, and it is not you. From day one, your job is to get this child two things: to learn how to live without you and to learn how to be available for Jesus. Now, when I say God has a plan for your children, I want to be very plain here that I disagree with most people when they make that statement, because what they mean is God wants your child to be a teacher. God wants your child to be a lawyer at this place. No. My daughter came to me back when she was a junior in high school, and that whole clock ticking thing about college is coming, and she says, which university should I go to? And my response to her was, you're a free woman in Christ. There's not a should. Pick one. Well, what major should I have? You're a free woman in Christ. I didn't want to break her heart and tell her that most people actually don't work in what they got their degree in. Unless they got it in engineering, most of us do something else in our life. And I was a bit of a hypocrite as well, because if she had chosen French medieval poetry, I would have said, well, why don't we go in the backyard and burn the money? It'll be quicker and the same result. But she chose a fair one. My point to her, I talked to her, your job is to be available to Jesus when he needs you where you are. That's God's plan for you. Do I believe God had a plan in mind to bring me up here? Not really. God had a plan in mind for me to be available and responsive to the call anytime I can be. See the difference? And so you're not shoehorned. God loves you as a child, but he gives you immense freedom as a child. We buy different vehicles. We like different stuff. We watch different shows. God loves diversity. If you don't like diversity and you don't like change, you've picked the wrong universe, because this universe is amazing. I'm going to do this really quick. I know a lot of people don't like math. We, by the best estimates, the entire universe, there are 10 to the 62nd power atoms. That's a 10 with a little 62 behind it. That's a 1 with 62 zeros. Draw that out sometime. It's an amazing looking number. Spend an afternoon putting the commas in the right place. People have asked me, what's the name for that? It has no name at that stage. It's 10 to the 62nd. It's not a Googleplex or any of those, and it's a real number. However, we can take the DNA from any man and any female, And we can create over 10 to the 128th power individuals, no copies or twins. Now, if you're really bad at math, you're thinking, right, 62nd power, 128th power, that's like twice as much. No, it's quadrillions of times more. Exponents work in a different way. My point being, God never makes the same person twice, and every person is more unique than the universe into which they are born. Therefore, your children, help them on a voyage of discovery to see who they are. Your job is not to tell them they're always perfect, and it's certainly not your job to put straitjackets on them and make them always perfect and behaving and such. No, let them be kids. God put a wiggle in kids. Let them wiggle. Let them be kids. The world wants them to grow up like this. Don't do it. Let them be kids as long as they can be kids. And then, as they do it, encourage their discovery. Every year, because I play a lot of stringed instruments, I get this from parents. They will say, my kid wants a guitar, but I don't want to put a lot of money into it because they also wanted to play piano and they quit, and they wanted to play trumpet and they quit, and now they want a guitar. Well, if you buy them a cheap guitar, they'll quit because they don't sound good. They're very hard to play. The intonation stinks. It's just, you put the money in it and then sell it if they don't like it. Here's the point, though. I say get them a guitar. Why? Because they need to find out if they're a guitar player. They have since found out a very important couple of things. They're not a trumpet player and they're not a piano player. That's valuable. Learn that. And now let's, instead of saying, well, that's a failure, you got the piano thing, and then we had, no, it's not a failure to learn what you're not. I took a couple of accounting courses at one time in university. Within 3 weeks, I realized this is not going to work. And I went to the professors. I said, God's peace be upon you. I'm not going to ever see you again unless we both cross the river into heaven. And they asked me, they're going, oh, Patrick, we like you. Why not? And I'm going, whenever I ask a physicist what the answer is, they do the math and show me. When I ask a chemist, they do the lab work and they show me. When I ask you, is this a credit or a debit, you ask, which do you want it to be? That's not going to work for me. I'm going to need something solid. If you don't know accounting, it's kind of like, what is the number you're looking for? We'll get there. No, I don't want to do that. I learned I was not an accountant. My parents at first were very upset. No, you've just quit. No, I didn't quit. I discovered. I learned. Now, did I quit everything that was hard? No, because some things you need to move forward in life. You need to know how to read. Every single day, I thank God for the teachers that taught me multiplication tables, how to divide, basic math, the alphabet, and how to find things alphabetically. There are some things we learned that were tough. Stay with it. But here's the danger, and I'm not one of these that goes, it's the world, it's worse than it's ever been. No, the world has been a lot worse than it is right now. You will not believe this statement, but I'm going to say it anyway. We have fewer people in poverty than we've ever had as a percentage of the human population. If you don't believe me, there is a book, and by the way, this book is written by a socialist, and he's an atheist as well. So I'm not giving you massaged Christian data, all right? And there is massaged Christian data out there, which I don't care for. Hans Rosling, Rosling, wrote a book you should have or you should know about. It's called Factfulness. And Factful has only one L in there, Factfulness. It is readable. And I say that not because I'm being condescending. I have trouble with some theology books because they're not readable unless you're a theologian. I have trouble with other books that aren't readable unless you're... No, he made it readable. And he looks at every single way you can look at the planet and we're doing better. Then why do we feel so terrible? Well, a couple of reasons, but one of the reasons is our media is designed to make you panic so that you stay tuned. They'll even do that. They'll come on, there's something in your kitchen, a threat to your family's life and health. News at 11. Really? What if I wanted to go in there? What if I needed a sandwich? Now, I don't know what's lurking. And when they do, Buffy will finally come on halfway through the news account, and say, don't rub raw chicken on your counters without then washing up after. I'm going, don't tell people. Let's let the stupid people just opt out of the genetic race. Let's just give them fireworks, raw chicken, say best of luck. And then maybe we'll have some smarter people down the road. But it's their job to terrify you. We have fewer wars than we've ever had. We have fewer armed conflicts now than ever in the history of mankind. We know because we've been tracking them, and the history of warfare, which is now in volume 3, it starts with 2400 BC, a Sumerian battle. Yeah, we're serious about tracking. And your news tries to tell you otherwise. So teach your children, and by the way, I spend a lot of time with law enforcement talking about fear and how not to be afraid. Not to be afraid of things that they shouldn't be afraid of. If I go to Chipotle now, do you know Chipotle? You have that up here, right? It's a Mexican restaurant, right? They've now gone to no GMO food, genetic modified organism food. Couple problems with that. Number one, every food you eat is genetically modified. The corn that the Indians gave to the colonists when they came across would have had about 30 or 40 kernels on each ear. We have genetically modified it. And because of that, people are not starving to death all over the world because we have better crops and the like. Second, nobody has ever been harmed by a genetic modified GMO. Ever. And in fact, let me count all the people. I'm done. None. And yet, people are terrified of this. And they're terrified of getting cancer from their cell phones. No. You will drive into a bridge long before you get cancer because you were texting. That's the stupid thing. Holding it up here, that's not a stupid thing. I still don't like the fact that people put in Bluetooth and walk around talking like they're crazy people. That's because it used to be so easy to spot a crazy person. They're talking to themselves. Now you can't. It's in an elevator. The guy walks in, stands there, and he goes, "Hey, how you doing?" I said, "I'm doing fine." And he looked at me and he goes, and so I just looked at him and I went, "Me too." And so that threw him off. The world is a different world, but we don't need to be afraid. Here are the things you should be afraid of. Right? By the way, in Europe, they banned GMO foods, and they're thinking about having to ban and put shields on the phones, and yet they smoke at a rate 3 times that of Americans. I'm going, you're not afraid of the right things. You need to be afraid of the right things. 70% of American youth say that there's no such thing as absolute right or wrong. And by the way, most of the 30% who say there is an absolute right or wrong, I'm not going to say most, a big hunk of that are Muslim kids, not Christian. In fact, Christian kids, 90% agreed with this statement. What is right for one person in a given situation might not be right for another person who encounters the same situation. No real right and wrong. 90% of our kids. Why? That's what they are told every single day in school and in the media. I was in West Virginia for 9 years, and while I was there, one of the administrators of West Virginia University came to me and said, "Do you know that you take courses everywhere you go?" And I said, "Well, why not?" They said, "Do you know that you're only 3 courses away from having another degree?" It was a bachelor's. I didn't really need it. But I said, "Really?" And they said, "Yeah, what do I need to take?" They said, "Anything." So I took Spanish. I took a few of that, figured I'd learn that. I took another couple courses. But what really amazed me, old guy sitting in there, for example, in Spanish, they would talk about the quinceañera. When a Spanish girl turns, or a Mexican girl turns 15, that's a huge deal. They do this big party. It's amazing. And they always wear this big white fluffy dress because, they're virginal and perfect. And then the teachers would say, of course, nobody believes she's a virgin at 15, and everybody was just laughing. I'm going, even in Spanish class, they're taught, forget all this. I went into anthropology classes, same thing. We have a great divide. 11 years ago, there were no smartphones. 11 years ago, if you wanted to listen to music or have a video or take a picture, you needed other equipment. If you needed to go places, you needed a map. There was, now GPS had shown up 11 years ago, But if you remember, it was really rotten. You had to get 3 satellites to hit you, and then you got an arrow. You didn't have something you could get directions. This has all occurred faster than our minds can rewire. So we have some issues. There are issues. Plus TV, plus, by the way, we used to be able to track children's misbehavior by when a TV got into their room. Now, the TV never leaves them. It's in their pocket. It's ubiquitous. It's everywhere they look. It used to be once upon a time the families would linger over the dinner table and talk. They don't do that now. In fact, when you come to Thanksgiving, people lay their phones beside their plates. And a lot of times, I was at the Grand Canyon a couple of years ago and looked around, and the kids that were there weren't, and some of the adults were not at the Grand Canyon. They were looking at their phone at the Grand Canyon. They weren't seeing it. We do have some dangers. We need to teach our children what to see, what not to see. We need to help them navigate the world so that they can live without us and be available to Jesus Christ. So one of the things I do with my boys, I call them my boys, my grands that live near me are boys 9, 7, and 3, is I teach them situation awareness. Now, I do. Police officers know this. I still cannot eat at a restaurant if my back is to the door, and it's not like I've had experience. No, it's just you're taught. Always keep your eyes open. And my son, now he's out of the Corps now, but there's something called the Lance Corporal Underground in the Marine Corps, and he's still tied into it. And every now and then he'll text me, and he'll say, keep your head on a swivel, such and such. When I get that also from marshals and Secret Service, or when there's a shooting, my phone starts lighting up because the cops that are involved in the shooting, not yesterday, I don't have anybody up around the Chicago area, but they'll tell me. And so I talk to my boys, and I'll say, where are you? Where's everybody else? I don't want them to be Jason Bourne and memorize all the license plates. That's not what I'm doing. But even as we were taught to drive, and again, the test in Britain is a whole lot tougher than the one over here. A whole lot tougher. Over here, it's basically, can you fog a mirror? Here's your license. Over there, you're taking courses for a year, and then your driver's test lasts over an hour. You're doing emergency maneuvers and everything else. One of the things they'll ask you is who is behind you, and you're not allowed to look up at the mirror. The mirror's over here because your steering wheel's over here. You're not allowed to look. You'd have to say, it's a green Lada. That's a Russian car. They sell those there. After a while, you're doing all kinds of stuff. They'll say, what's behind you now? You tell them, and they'll say, where'd the Lada go? And you have to be able to tell them when it turned off or stopped. They want you to be aware of where you are at all times. And we do that with our boys. I'll stop them every now and then. And you'll see kids run into people, and I'll say, you weren't watching. Watch the traffic flow. Watch how people are walking. It's like a game. It's like in chess. Watch where things are going. And they start paying attention to it. And it's amazing. They enjoy knowing where they are and where the other people are and watching the faces, who's angry, who's not watching me. We'll even play in the car, who's on the phone. And they can tell by the way they're driving and by the way the light goes green and there's a hesitation. Teach them. But then teach them to understand right and wrong, because here's the thing. They don't get it from outside the family, and they don't get it from inside the family because the family unit has changed. And when I talk to kids, one of the things I tell them is, I know that you think your parents are throwing ropes over you and tugging you down. And you'll think about, well, my grandmother got married when she was 14 years old. And that might be true. It's not nearly as common as you think, but it might be true. But what did your grandmother do once she got married? Well, they built their house right there. And the uncles were right there. And the cousins were right here. All she had to know was Cal 101 and basic sewing, and you're up to date on technology. Today, you're an average of 30 years old before you can afford your own health insurance and rent. And you're still falling behind technology if you don't watch yourself. Our life has gotten complex. Teach your children. We need to be careful because the world's getting away from us. All right? 60% of homes in 1970 had a grandparent living in it. Wisdom from the ages was available. Not now. Grandparents are in Florida. You know, home of the newlywed and nearly dead. They've moved away. Apprenticeship has ended. We don't do apprenticeships anymore unless you're in certain unions do. So you're thrown into a job with a university degree that usually doesn't prepare you for the job. In Britain, it doesn't either, but we do it better because as a rule, it's called a sandwich degree. You go 2 or 3 years, and then you go work in that field for a year, and then you come back to get your degree. But that's part of the degree. You don't get your degree unless you've gone to work in the field. It's a whole different system. Then at least you have an idea of how to do the job. But you also have the idea, when I go to work, I know I have my expectations are right. Over here, kids graduate from university with a liberal arts degree, and they think they should be able to buy a house like their mom and dad and cars like their mom and dad. We have to teach our children how to navigate reality. All right? Talk to them. We don't ever watch things like The Bachelor or The Bachelorette because to me that the immorality is not an entertainment. But we'll talk to them. We talk to them about it. We'll say, would you want to marry a girl who would go on one of these shows? All those little ghosts of all those other guys stay in their head, and those ghosts don't age. You do. Those ghosts don't stink after they've mown the lawn. You do. Do you want to compete against those ghosts the rest of your life? We talk to them, in other words, about reality. What is real? If people, well, for example, Friends, very well written, very funny show. But some people went through and counted the sexual partners of each person on that. And so we sat down with our kids and we looked at the numbers. And I said, in reality, every one of these would have sexually transmitted diseases for the rest of their life. You can't get a shot and fix this. The rest of their life, anybody they slept with would get one. And condoms don't protect against a lot of them. Is this really what you want from your world? Also, half of them would be dead because jealous people would have shot them or they would have committed suicide because of broken heart. Is this what you want for your life? And we talk about the stars that come out. We're going to be in Puerto Rico again in July. I do some work there, but also that's my wife's happy place is Old San Juan. So she's going to come with me and she's going to enjoy while I work. When we're there, one of the things we do is go into the area called Condado. And it's a wealthy area. And again, I'm doing some work there. But that's where Jennifer Lopez has her apartment, where she used to live with Mark Anthony before she divorced him. She's divorced many others. And you look and people say, oh, she's so beautiful and this, that, and the other. I'm going, I want you to look at her life and then look at ours. Ours looks so boring. But think of the joy that's in our life that's not in hers. And we start showing reality. Teach your kids reality. It's so important. Materialism is huge, by the way, and that's not the kids didn't cause the materialism being an issue. It was our grandparents started that. I want you to think, Father Knows Best. Do you remember that show way back in the day? Or My Three Sons? Where was Dad almost all the time? At work. Why was he at work? To buy stuff for the family. Leave It to Beaver. Where was Dad most of the time? You know, June was always in the kitchen making cookies, but that wasn't realistic either because her hair was done and the like. Forget that. But the whole point was Dad was absent to earn money to buy the refrigerator, to buy the air conditioning, and there are consequences to that materialism which still roll forward today. I have friends, and I love my iPhone. Don't get me wrong. My iPhone allows me to be connected to so many people and things. I can get information. It's wonderful. I found here using my iPhone. And yet, the new ones are coming out around September, October. They always do. And I have friends that will be in line. And I'm going to ask them, why? Not one of them can tell me what it's going to do. I've had people say, it's faster. You know, it could be a bit faster. Yes, absolutely. But I don't think your brain is fast enough to see the faster. And I'm not being insulting. I just know what brains do. They run at a certain frequency. There's a limit to fast. We're terrified. Children need to be raised intentionally. Albert Siegel, Stanford University, here's a quote for him. When it comes to raising children, every society is only 20 years away from barbarism. 20 years is all we have to accomplish the task of civilizing the infants who are born into our midst each year. The infant is totally ignorant about democracy and civil liberties, respect, decency, customs, conventions, and all manners. The barbarian must be tamed if civilization is to survive. It's absolutely true. And yet he's in Stanford University. Do you think how he wants to tame your children is the same as you want to tame your children? Now you see, we have competing systems trying to raise your kids. This is why yes and no and I said so is fine for a 3-year-old. But even then, you should start showing them the why. To live without you, they need the why. My kids knew that they could come to me and say, "Da," we say "da" in Irish and Scottish, "Da, I don't think that's right," or "Why can't I?" or I don't agree with. They were allowed to because they knew I would sit down and we would go over the facts. And most of the time I would win because I'd been on the planet longer and I knew the facts. Other times they would show me something and I would say, "Okay, all right, you made your point. I think this will be fine." I had and by the way, a little nugget helped me with this. Dean Tripp, I'm going to give him credit, although you'll never meet him, was one of my elders when I first came to America in the late 80s. That's untrue. When I returned to America, I had been here before. When I'd returned to America in the late 80s to live this time, Dean Tripp was one of my elders, and he had 3 sons who were just amazing men. And so Cammie and I had just one wee girl, a 3-year-old girl born in Scotland. We brought her over to America. So now we sat down with Dean and Ann and we said, "What advice can you give us about raising children?" We expected a long night and we didn't get it. Dean looked at me and he said, "Never say no when you can say yes." I looked at him and I went, "I don't like that." But then he went to unfold it and he was right. When you say no, instinctively and as a reaction, your kid gets to where they expect the no. If you say no only when you have to, it makes them stop and wonder the why. And you can have a discussion on the why. And they went on to say, whenever your little kid is crawling toward a light socket or the stairs and you yell, "No," and then they stand up and they're starting to reach up to the stove and you go, "No." And then when they're 5 and they say, "Can I play?" and you go, "No," and without thinking the no. Instead of backing up and going, "Well, let's talk about this. What would happen with?" And we would play a game with our kids all the time. What's next? What happens next? Let's play imagination. And it was fun, but it also taught them to understand consequences. Because kids don't get consequences today as a rule. Back in the day, you'd have to hurry if it was your turn to get to the school to start the stove, and if you didn't, everybody was cold all day. There are 1,000 of those things that aren't here anymore. We need to teach our kids that there are things about how do we treat this person? Well, this person's older than you, so how should we treat them? This person's younger. How should we treat them? And we would do imagination games. Play imagination games. Live the way you want your children to live. Now, I don't know how to do this and not be hurtful, but I'm sorry, it's reality. If you are undisciplined, your children will not be disciplined. They just won't. I've had a doctor once when I had to stop and go see a doctor for a particular thing. He wasn't my doctor. Don't want to go into all of it. He came in, he was grossly overweight, sloppy, and you could tell by the cough he was a smoker, and he was telling me how to make changes in my life. And no, I'm not going to. I'm not taking that from you. I need a disciplined person to tell me how to be disciplined. Kids need that as well. if you want your children, your sons, to respect women, they should only hear respect coming out of your mouth to the wife and to all women. Even if your mother-in-law is difficult, they should only hear respect. Even if again, if you want your daughters to only marry good men, you should date your daughter and treat her the way she should be treated. In fact, when my daughter was a senior in high school, and my daughter, if you've ever seen her, she doesn't have a big presence on Facebook, but she shows up. She is stunningly beautiful and witty and smart as she can be. And she'd never dated. And we had good-looking Christian guys in our church that wanted to date her. So I was getting a little concerned because I was thinking, a lot of kids when they're 16, they're ready. Or 12, going, no. She never. And so I sat her down and I actually said, I just got to ask you, why, Joe over here, and there was a guy named Joe, he's really interested in you. Why aren't you interested back? And she looked at me and she goes, Dad, I'm loved and happy. I'm in no hurry. I went into our room, shut the door, looked at my wife, and goes, yes, we're winning. She married the first guy she dated, but not like this. It was a year and a half after they started dating. But it was because she was looking for somebody who would treat her the way we do. Treat your children. Show them the discipline. My wife corrected me one time, and I got very defensive at first. She came down, she said, Patrick, your children never see you studying the Bible. I went, I'm all about the Bible. What are you talking about? She goes, you play with them and you work with them and you help them with their homework, and then when they're in bed, you open up the Bible. You're right. You're right. So we adjusted my schedule so that they would see. We also did something else, very helpful. We let our kids help us with taxes, and we let our kids write the checks book, the checks in the checkbook. We would sign them, but they would do the math, and they would write, because that way they saw money's not unlimited. They would also see where the money goes, not just for taxes and mortgage and insurance, but also this much is going to the church. This much is going to this mission work. This much is going to Wounded Warriors. This much is, they saw that when, and I got to the point where my kids, when they were teenagers, never asked for anything in the mall because they understood what money does and that it was limited. And we were just amazed. We weren't actually we're aiming at that, but that was a great side effect. They understood what money does. They're better with money than I am because I wasn't raised like this. I was raised away from it, and so whenever I went out into the world, debt exploded because I didn't know how to handle. They don't do debt. My son and my daughter-in-law have been in their home now for 6 years, and it's almost paid for. And I'm looking at him going, how? And my son's looking at me like, you idiot, you showed me how. And I'm going, yeah, but no, it showed me. So, it's, but again, they will live what they see in you. Lot. Remember Lot in the Bible? Oh, my goodness. What a tragic story. Lot. Are you aware? The Bible calls Lot a righteous man. Peter. So this is after all that happened. He's called a righteous man. Well then, why did things go so wrong? Because he moved to a city to have better economic opportunities for himself and his family without thinking of the dangers it put his family into. That's why. That's what damaged everything. He went to provide for his family without thinking of the consequences. Let me explain how that works. I'm at a certain age in life to where I enjoy a buffet. I lost a bunch of weight 6 years ago, and I've kept it off, so I can never get my money's worth. I used to be able to. If you've ever gone into Golden Corral, you know that very, very heavy people will run over you with those little scooters to get to whatever's there. But every so often, I go to a buffet and I just think, when you go to a buffet, you know you have to have a strategy, right? You can't eat everything. I've tried. But you also have to be careful what goes on the plate because there's a limited amount of room here. But my dad used to take me to one, and they were all in America. We don't have this overseas. And I'd see the salads and jellos and such. I start to read. He'd go, no. That's how they get you. I'm going, right, okay. And he moved down to the meats and the better things. And I learned, now I get the desserts first because I figured Jesus could come back, and I don't want to be thinking, I had cake. There was cake. But if I left broccoli behind, okay. And so in America, you're brilliant, so you are. You will make mashed potatoes, and then you create a hole in the middle, and you put gravy in it. It's like a gravy dam, but since we're Christians, a gravy darn, maybe. And you eat it in such a way that the gravy does not get loose and mess up something else. Some of you are really dangerous living on the edge people, and you will get beets. Don't get beets. They're horrid. I know, and by the way, in Scotland, they're treated as a dessert. I'm not kidding. People say, if you don't eat your food, you'll no get your beets. I'm going, deal. I've never liked them. God made them purple. He hid them under the ground so that you wouldn't find them. And then when you make them, the purple radioactive stuff comes out, right? What does it do? It purples everything. My point is this, in case you're wondering where you're going. Life is a buffet. What you put on your plate can endanger everything else on the plate. If I go to movies that glorify violence and sex, and my kids know it, what is on my plate and what is endangering the other things on my plate? Or if I want my children to learn how to give to mission work, and yet every year I'm buying a new, more expensive car because my status is important to me, what have I done? I've shown them that my lips say God, but my wallet says world. I've endangered what's on the plate. You can't put everything there. So as you go through life, you think, I'm going to have a career, wife, kids, husband, kids, whatever you are. But what would endanger the things on the plate? I talked to a man who'd been married for 5 years and still carried in his wallet pictures of an old girlfriend. I said, first of all, are you insane? I have no problem saying this to people. And he was going, no, it's just, it just reminds me of friends and times. I go, no, it doesn't. You are poisoning the system. I carry in my wallet, I was showing a couple guys there, the senior picture of my wife. Why? Because she still looks like that to me 40 years later. But if I were to carry the senior picture of a girlfriend and then look at my wife and then look at this, what am I going to see? I've poisoned our relationship. Why would you do that? Even in words, teach your children the words you choose can end the good day. For example, let's make this up. I'm waiting because the pizza's supposed to arrive any moment, and when it arrives, it's here? You're saying, wow, they were ninjas. Well done. All right, let me say this, and then we'll take our break because you have to. You have to eat, and then we'll talk some more. And I can talk while you're eating or after you're eating. I don't really care. Just like I said, I work for you, and so I'm happy to do that. I want to do this little poisoning thing in your verbal as well, all right? Jesus said, let your yes be yes and your no be no, and that's very important. He said, whatever else comes is from the evil one. I had a man in my office with his wife. She was a beautiful woman, but he was sitting there criticizing her, and she was sitting there crying. I had about enough of it, and then he used a word to describe her. And I reared up a little bit and slammed my hand on the desk. It was a bit of theater, but he wasn't expecting it. Things bounced, and he kind of looked at me. And I pointed my finger at him. Now, this is a big weightlifter guy, and I'm not. I pointed at him. I said, who gave you that word? And he froze. And he said, what? Well, no, I'm angry. No. Who gave you that word? And we went back and forth for a while. And I said, you may not be aware of this, but English has more words than any other language. It does, by a factor of 2. We have twice as many words as the language that comes in second place. All of those words to describe your wife, you chose that one. Who gave you that word? And we came down to talking about who are you listening to that would tell you that word applies to that woman? What voices are in your head? Who have you given control of in your head? You have to be careful with our words. Let's say I actually like broccoli, but let's say I didn't. But my wife knows I need the foods that are in the crucifer family because they're anti-cancer. It won't guarantee that you don't get cancer, but it helps. So, but if I hated it, I come in at night and she's made the meal because we covered that yesterday. I sit down and there's broccoli. And if she were to ask me, how do you like your meal? I will thank her for making the meal and how much I appreciate it. If she goes, what about the broccoli? I can say to her, I don't like broccoli, but I understand why you made it, and I appreciate that you want me to hang around. Or I could say, I don't like broccoli. You keep making broccoli. You're just like your mother. Now what have I done? Have I poisoned the evening? Last story. Man came into my office mad at his wife because she kept wasting money. And I said, give me illustrations. And he did several. She's batty. She didn't think about it. We went out all last night, and the oven was still on when we came home. And they had quite the row, evidently, quite the fight afterwards. I said, seriously, over that? And he said, well, and I said, just a moment. I looked up the number and called the electric company. And I said, how much does that cost? And it was like $3. I pulled a $5 out of my wallet and handed it to him. I said, leave her alone. And he just stared at me and at the money. And he goes, I don't understand. And I said, for $3.50, you ruined a perfectly good evening with your wife. You sold her for $3.50. What kind of person are you? Think about it. If you have questions, we can do that during the eating time, but I haven't even started on the notes yet, so who knows where we're going to go, right? But we will continue to talk about kids because it's Kids Day. What do we do now, boss? All right, I was just asked if I'd be at summer celebration. Go eat, get extra, whatever you need, right? That does not bother me a bit, I promise you. Was asked if I was going to be at summer celebration. Yes. If you don't know what that is, it's held at Lipscomb University every summer. Normally, it runs into the 4th of July. This year, it's a bit early. It's June 26, 27, 28. Right? There is a small cost, but they also, if you wish, they have accommodations on campus that are really inexpensive. And what it is you will have about 20 speakers like myself are doing things all the time, morning through night. I usually just do late night. They call it late night. It's like 8 o'clock. But I'll do that session each evening for the 26th, 27th. The 28th normally ends in the afternoon and you have a fireworks show. I'm assuming they're going to do it this year as well. It's kind of like, we had a British speaker. Now let's show him that we won. So that's, and I'm sure Kentucky does it as well. But I've never seen the amount of fireworks that are in Tennessee. I mean, it is everywhere. And I'm working with veterans that have PTSD, so they're hiding in their basements and stuff. And I stood on my deck and I'm watching 3 different displays going off in my neighborhood, massive things. And I turned to my wife and I said, the last time I saw this many fireworks, we lost Baltimore. So that's, but anyway, I will be talking, I have my own thread, but there are so many threads. Go to lipscomb.edu and look up summer celebration, and you can get the whole schedule there, and it's lovely. It is amazing. You can't listen to everybody, so you have to choose. But they do record, and you can get the record. Yeah, everything is recorded, so you can get the recordings. It's just a really good service they do. They do, and they make sure that you are welcomed, that everything is taken care of. There are kids and teens programs. It is. It is really good. And the suppers and such, the food is good as well, if you choose to eat on campus. But if you don't, you're in the Green Hills section of Nashville. And that means while traffic will be a bit of a bear, there are side roads over there to dozens of restaurants. And just dozens and dozens. So you'll be great. Thank you for telling me, reminding me of that. But I go every year. It's kind of fun that I get to go and speak, and because it's in my neighborhood. It takes me 30 minutes to get there. And so they'll always say, we'll have to pay you, we're willing to pay you for your expenses. And I'm going, no, I'm just driving there. And so it's one of the freebies. I do 3 freebies a year, and that's one of them. All right. Most children are raised by accident, which means you don't have a plan. You're not really thinking, and you're a pinball. Now think about this. And one of the things I push to my church is be a person, not a pinball. Most people, if you don't know about pinball machines, I'm sure you do, they go up and they bounce. Anything they hit, they react to. Most people live their life in reaction to the last thing that hit them. They're angry because of that guy. They're happy because of this. And then they raise kids to be the same accidental, reactive people. And so I teach my people and my grands, and I taught my kids, you always have the power to choose your response. Always. You always have power to choose who you let into your life. Adults need to learn this as well. I'd just been in America for a bit when a man asked if I would go with him to visit somebody. And I said, sure. We got in the car, and a guy pulled out right in front of us. I mean, we had to lock the brakes not to run into him, in a super expensive sports car. And, of course, the guy laid on the horn. And the guy that did that and pulled out in front of us just raised his middle finger as he drove off. Well, the man that was driving was just incensed, very angry. About 15 minutes later, he was still angry. I looked at him and I said, how long have you known that guy? And he says, well, I don't know him. I said, really? I thought you must be friends. And he looked at me like I'm crazy, but I'm very comfortable with that look, very comfortable. And I said, if he's not your friend, why have you invited him into your life for the last 15 minutes? If he wasn't a friend, why didn't you just let him drive off? You get to choose. So we talk to our kids about this. You will have friends, we'll tell the kids, that'll be devastated if they don't get to go to that concert, or if they don't get that phone, or if they don't. You get to choose how you respond. You get to deal with reality. You get to work your life and do it on purpose. I chose to come here. There are places I don't choose to go. And someone was talking to me at the break, and I said, small churches have a bit of my heart. My wife and I have had the discussion. Our retirement is going to be a very hard road if I ever retire. It will be. Because I didn't copyright my stuff, and I won't. And because I don't write a bunch of books and try to sell them, and I don't charge the earth and sky, I still go to small churches. And by the way, I have very good friends who are on the speaking circuit who think I'm insane. But I keep telling them, I'm a shrink. I've checked me out. I'm fine. You, on the other hand, have some concerns, but I'm not trying to say poor, pitiful me. No, it's not. There's nothing poor or pitiful about my life. It is a joyful journey, and it's on purpose. I choose. This is the way I'm going to do things. Live in reality. Teach them. Now, this is going to be hard. Teach them reality, and that includes appropriate sexual roles. It is fascinating to me to watch the American left, which is the same as the British left, by the way, and European left. They will say, for example, if you kill a seal or eat a bit of a cow, you're evil, but we can kill a baby. They're also against the death penalty, and I am as well, by the way, because I'm not sure it's done fairly in America. I think it's done if you have the right lawyers, you don't have it, and if you don't, you do, and so I have struggles with that. But the left will also say, if you deny that the climate is changing, you're denying science. Well, I don't deny that it's changing, because that's what climates do. But the same people will say, You can be any sex you want, any day you want, according to how. And I'm going, no, there are two. And you can have all of the operations to either chop things off or put things on. And you can, I'm not going to play with you here. I didn't go to preacher school, so I don't know what words I'm not allowed to say. You can have all the hormones you want, and you can even be married to another guy who's pregnant, and they'll say, look, no, that's not a guy. Because at your very core, every cell of your body has either two Y's or an X and Y. Every cell. And you cannot change it. And the fact is, it used to be, by the way, the sex change capital of the world was Trinidad, Colorado. Beautiful little town in south central Colorado. All those clinics are shut now, the last I heard. But they have clinics elsewhere. But people would come from everywhere to Trinidad. We have done the studies. And by the way, I had a young lady leave my church when I brought this up and ding us hard on Facebook and refused to ever come back. I said, if that's your reaction to fact, I can't help you. The studies are in. More than 80% of the people that have had the operations and the hormones wish they hadn't. That's never on your telly at all. Just be aware, you need to teach your children the world is a fantasy land. You don't have to play. Again, I don't mean to be picking on Jennifer Lopez. She might be a very nice person now, but in her life, she has railed against people because the sheets weren't high enough count, whatever that is. I know a lot of these things because I bump up against the music industry, living there, and you meet people. I always say if you're in Nashville and you see a homeless lady, be nice. That's Steven Tyler. Because he walks around looking like a homeless lady. He really does. But he loves to talk to people. And you can be sitting at your table in South Broadway eating a meal, and he'll sit down and start talking. And I've had people start going, and I go, no, it's all right, Aerosmith. He's actually a guy. And he's just don't do drugs. This is your brain. This is your brain on drugs. Any questions? And we talk to the kids even about that. If you want to play with your brain inside, learn skills, create. Don't play with your brain by putting a chemical in there that may change your brain forever. Now, a lot of our kids think they are failures because the world will tell them you don't have the right shape, you don't have the right accomplishments, you don't have the... And at the same time, the world is messing with their brains by saying everything about you is wonderful, there are no winners or losers. It is a mixed message. Kind of like on the left, that death is... By the way, some on the right are opposed to abortion, but they love the death penalty, and they would exercise it against their neighbors. You have to. There's a lot of room. Since my time is limited here, I'm just going to use an illustration, and I hope this works. The world, the universe, is not digital; it's analog. Now I will explain. In digital, it's a 0 or a 1. You're on or you're off. Years ago, my first cell phones were analog because the whole system was analog. And there were times that you'd be hearing this, a lot of that as you're talking to people because you didn't have a really good signal. Today, they switched it to digital, which means sometimes you can't talk at all. Instead of having that fuzzy connection, you're either all the way on or all the way off. Last night, I was on the phone to talk to my wife on the drive back to my hotel. Twice, the phone dropped. If it had been analog, it would have stayed on. Now, what am I saying? This is called fuzzy logic, and I know fuzzy logic sounds like it's an insult. It is not. It's a physics term. For example, absolute hot, absolute cold. There's a lot of room in here. Play with this room. What does warm mean is fuzzy logic. Because when do you get too warm? And you're just moving things back and forth. Here's my point. The world will say, you must look like this to be attractive. Back in Raphael's day and Rembrandt, you had to be a lot heavier to be attractive. Who gets to choose who's attractive? Who gets to choose what you look like? We have somebody whose only job is to not eat and wear clothes. And we'll say, that's a model. A model? I know what they mean by model. It means someone who we should aspire to, but the real meaning of model is a cheap imitation of the real thing. So I'm looking going, you know something, that's their job. It's kind of like the guy who will stand there by the Bowflex or exercise machine, and he doesn't have a six-pack, he has 12. He's just really ripped. And he'll even say things, I used to be a SEAL, and now 15 minutes a day is all you need. Seriously, that's his job. All he does all day is lift and put down things. That's it. Now, if that's what you want your life to be, congratulations. And I'm serious. If that's your goal in life, then you've achieved it. It's kind of like people that argue on sports radio or ESPN. I keep wondering, how do you spend your life arguing about something that won't matter tomorrow? And people will forget about it. But they're passionate. And I'm going, what do you want on your tombstone? He argued about a lot of stuff. We don't remember any of it. Is that what you want? Well, why don't we find a place in the middle? And you can look like what you look like. God gave you that. Now, to a point. You can grossly abuse your body, and the things you do to hair is just amazing. But God gave you the equipment to be who you are. God approves of you. You don't need that approval from the world. Learn this story. It's a true story. Most preacher stories are not, in my opinion. This one is. There was a young woman in America. This is back in the 60s. Her high school did this design the house you'd like to live in thing. And she had never done that before. She made her little thing. And she won her high school. It was really amazing. She's about 15, 16 years old. So they did the county, because back then you didn't have one big school for the county. You had little schools all over. So she went to the county thing, and they all put their best ones in, and she won that one. And she won her state. I mean, people were just cannot believe this. Her achievements are amazing. And so now all the winners of the states got to go to Washington, D.C., where there'd be a big judging. Now, back in the day, please remember, you got on a bus and you waved to your kid as they went away, knowing you would not talk to them until they got to their hotel, and then it would be a super expensive call, about $3 or $4 a minute, back when you were making $120 a week. People don't remember this, but so she goes off to Washington. And they put all their stuff in a big hall, kind of like this, but it was where people ate as well. So people ate in the middle. It was all around all the winners. And everybody was just sure she was going to blow out the top, because she had just won, and she didn't win. She didn't get runner-up. She got no honorable mention. She got nothing. So here's this little girl a long way from her family. I believe this girl came from Ohio, but I'm not very certain on that. I can go back and check. Here she is, this little girl that has no support system where she is. She's got to call her family and tell them she won nothing. When an old man came in, and she watched him take a look at everything very carefully going around, and then he came back to hers, and he heard him mutter to himself, I think this is the best one. It changed her life because she recognized the man. The man was Frank Lloyd Wright, greatest architect America has ever had. If the greatest architect says you're the best, you're the best. So I'll talk to kids. I had a man send in his 15-year-old daughter. She was almost 6 foot tall and broad and miserable and depressed because she didn't look like the other girls. She was just, my heart broke for her. What do you do when you're like this? We sat down and we talked for quite a bit. I said, I want you to understand something. Vogue says you don't look right and you don't fit in our society. Of course, she's starting to tear up. I said, I want you to stay with me. People magazine and us say you don't fit right and you're never going to be on our magazine. Let's just keep going. Cosmopolitan, you don't ever want to be on the front of this thing. But if they ever looked at you, they would say you're not right. God, however, says you're perfect. You have to decide whose opinion you're going to take. That's it. I first came, and there's so much here that I could talk about. I first came to America, and the first church I met, the elders held their meetings on the golf course. And they turned to me and said, "Oh, you're from Scotland. You'll fit right in." I said, "I'd never golfed in my life." And they said, "What?" And I've walked St. Andrew's course. I thought golf was silly. Spend all that money, fight all that time, get the ball in the hole. What do? Pull it right back out. Seriously? Well, they handed me clubs, and they said, "We're going to teach you because this is where we talk." And so they handed me women's clubs, which I felt wonderful about. But, you know, I played a bit, maybe one game, I think it was, on a par 3. And they said, "Next week our church has a scramble." And I was thinking, well, that sounds delicious. No, it's not food. It's a golfing thing. And I said, "I've just played the one time." And they said, "No, the minister always and the staff, and I'm just a counseling." But yeah, all right, fair enough. But I lucked out because somebody died and I had a funeral that day. But I made, people die. It just worked for me. I made the mistake of driving past the golf course, and they saw me. And they all started waving. I'm going, "Oh, dearie, I have to go in now." And they were all waiting for me. I'm in a suit. They hand me a club. They send me, and they're making all kinds of comments. And this is a real course, not a par 3. I hit the ball, and it did all right. And later someone came up to me, and they said, "How did you have the presence of mind to hit the ball?" I told them the truth. I said to myself before I hit the ball, no matter where this goes, or even if it goes, Jesus loves me. And you have to figure that. I was concerned about this, coming here and trying to dump all this information in as short of a time. But I know God will do with it what God will do with it. It's not me. And with your children, helping them understand this. My son was very much struggling with math, and he wanted to be a Marine Corps officer. And I knew if he has D's in high school algebra, this is not going to do it. We later moved him to a different school, and he was brilliant. It was a clash, a personality clash. The teacher was fine, but it was just the personalities weren't gelling somehow. That happens. Teachers aren't evil if your kids get bad grades. But I went in for the parent-teacher conference, and I looked at, I sat down, and I said, "My son's really struggling here." The teacher looked at me and said, "Dr. Mead, the first thing I need to tell you is this. Your son is a Christian gentleman." I said, "We're done." I said, "I don't need to talk anymore." On the way out, a principal got a hold of me. He goes, "I really appreciate what your son did. That was just amazing." And I stopped. I go, "What?" He was a sophomore. He's big. My son's 6'5". And everybody goes, "How do you get that?" Well, from me. I wasn't using my height and muscle. I'm a donor. In our family, we spit one like that out every so often. So there's one. So he's a big guy. That school had been trying to integrate. It was a Christian school. It was a big school. It was like 1,300 Christian school people there right in Detroit. But African Americans, it was very hard to get them in. And so they got some scholarship money, and they brought in 30 or 40. And evidently one of the girls had been hassled. And some comments had been made. My son heard. Well, my son is not a pinball. So it's not like I hear comments, so I'm going to punch you. That's a reaction. Instead, he had a plan because he's a person. And I taught my kids, have a plan. He walked up to her and he said, "May I know your schedule for class?" She was very concerned about what he was going to do. He said, "No, you have nothing to fear from me. What is your schedule?" And for some reason, she gave it to him. He said, "Thank you." And for a couple of weeks, he would show up when her class dismissed and walk her to the next one without a word. He never said, "I'm protecting her." He made it very plain. Not interested in dating. That's not this. I just want to help you. Have a peaceful day. And nobody was going to mess with Duncan. Because Duncan was also very high up in karate and big. And they knew his dad had an attitude. So they didn't. And he never told us. And the principal said, "I can't believe he didn't tell you." And I said, "No, I can." Because that wasn't a big deal. He just made a plan. Teach your kids not to react to everything like they're dying or like they're winning at life, but to have a plan. I have people tell me I'm the best man they've ever met, and I know that's not true. They don't know it. I just thank them. I've had people walking out, my wife's standing right there after I've done a seminar, and they'll say, oh, I wish I'd married a man like you. And my wife could break out in gales of laughter at this point. But she doesn't react. She has a plan. Her plan is to support me. She knows I don't believe I'm perfect and wonderful. We're all right. We have a plan. It is shocking, Christmas commercials that'll look out and there are two big trucks. I gave you this one. And obviously they didn't talk. If you remember that one, because the woman wanted the one he wanted. I'm going, you didn't have a discussion before buying two $65,000 trucks? I would have had a talk. But they do that to make you feel like you've got to up your game. I don't react. By the way, even Hyundai got into it. And I'm going, it started with Mercedes. Now Hyundai has it. Fair enough. That's all I need to know. And by the way, Hyundais are very well made. I owned one for a long time. But I'm just going, you just watch. It'll be a bicycle next time. You don't have to react. The world does that. You don't have to. Be at peace. Have a plan. Learn that they live what they see in you. And if they see you hit with humor and the like, it's great. And by the way, let's do this. This is important. This is a study I've never heard quoted. It's by Harold Skeels. And he did a survey on mental development that was massive. He didn't get 200 people. This was nationwide. But then he checked in one state institution. We had several state institutions at the time. This is where, and I know we don't normally use these terms, but I'm going to use these terms, all right? This is where mentally retarded children, and that doesn't mean just Downs, but they're included there, who are unable to function in society or with the family, were being warehoused. Most Down syndrome people can do just fine and be independent. These are on the other end of that spectrum. We have to acknowledge that they can be to a point where mom and dad can't deal. They were placed in these facilities. There are state institutions like this we never talk about, but they're there. 13 were taken from one institution and put to another. I'm sorry. Let me back up. They gave these mentally retarded women a playmate who was also mentally retarded, but a child. 3-year-old was the average. They gave them this. They would play. It was intensive. Sometimes they were taken on small trips. And this was like every week. There were several hours that this child would come. During the 18-month experiment, the experimental group gained 28 IQ points. If you don't understand what I'm talking about here, we have no way of raising your IQ. None. We can make you dumber. We cannot make you smarter. You are born with a ceiling. Now, you're probably not there, so don't worry. But you're born with a ceiling. And we don't use just 10% of our brain. That's a ridiculous statement. If we did only use 10%, how would we know that? All right? You're using every bit we found so far. We cannot make you dumber, rather smarter, but we can make you dumber. These people became smarter because they had intense interactions with their children. And these kids, they're developed. They almost all of them got to leave the institutions. They could function on the outside now. It was found that those who did not have them died and got dumber. Their IQ dropped 26 points. The only difference was time spent. I hear it all the time. People say, well, it's the quality of time, not the quantity of time. That's ridiculous and scientifically disproven. It is time. Time you spent. Doesn't have to be quality. Time. You're there. You're available. When I go over to my grandson's house, we play a lot and we talk a lot, but it's not like I have to be massively involved. I'm there. The 9-year-old wants to play basketball constantly, and I'll videotape him and encourage him, but I don't do a lot of it. The 7-year-old is science, and he and I will do electric experiments and such. I buy him kits, and we work on that. The 3-year-old, he's going to make the news. I just don't know what page of the newspaper. He is brilliant, and I love him, and he is an interesting little guy, but I have no idea which way he's going to fly. But that's all right. We're going to let him be who God wants him to be. We're going to play with that. I have a 4-year-old granddaughter, my only granddaughter, who I tell her she's my prettiest granddaughter and my favorite, and she just beams. One of these days she's going to understand math, and that's going to go away. And I have a little boy who's 18 months old, and he's wearing size 36. Now, that's the son of my Marine son. And he's a wrecking ball. He really is. I have no idea what he's going to do either, but everybody's going to know. And when I go up there, I don't have to be intensely involved. I just have to be there. My wife today is at the games. My wife's never played basketball in her life. She didn't even know why. Why'd they blow that whistle? They were traveling. Well, what does that mean? Let's just be quiet and enjoy the game, girl. We don't play this in Scotland either. She's from Colorado, but we don't play it in Scotland. We don't have people tall enough, Your children need to understand that you are involved in their life and you're there. You're just there. You don't have to know much about it. Time spent doesn't have to be quality. You're there. Now, what's the children's job? We don't have a lot of time for this, but a behavioral developmental therapist, and there aren't that many that are that sharp. Most therapists, by the time they hit PhD, are actually grabbing from many modalities. And so we're talking about somebody whose entire life is in developmental psychology, can spend 10 or 15 minutes with you and then ask you a question that rattles you, such as, tell me what happened when you were 12 years old. And you just, how did you know? Because they see where people get stuck. You have jobs in your life, and if you get stuck, you cannot move on until that's dealt with. 0 to 18 months, by the way, this is a bubble, and it can move. So 24 months could be in this as well. 0 to 18 months, trust versus mistrust. If they hold me, will they drop me? If I'm hungry, will somebody care? If I cry, does somebody notice? They learn trust and mistrust. And so when a lot of Americans adopt kids from overseas that have not learned trust and have been abused or neglected, their entire life they're having struggles with the child because nobody taught them, you're going to have to teach them trust. They got stuck on mistrust. We have friends that got some children from Romania, which was a nightmare. It was just a nightmare, Romania, and the way they treated the kids. And they would come and find the kids were hiding food under their beds. It took them until they were teenagers to learn to trust. Just be aware. 18 months to 3 years is autonomy versus shame and doubt. You'll hear people say, oh, the terrible threes or terrible twos. All that is that they are learning who is me and not me. And that's a real struggle, that first separation. Autonomy versus shame and misdoubt. Am I okay as a person? Am I all right? I see parents, well, stop doing it. You're so stupid. No, and I'm going. In fact, in one Kroger, I actually walked up to a kid, got on the floor on my knees, handed him a card. I said, in 10 years, you're going to need that number. And the woman looked at me like she wanted to hit me, but go for it, girlie. I have a plan. You can react. I got a plan. Your job is to help them succeed. Be very careful. Their idea of God will come from this period of time. This 18 months to 3 years. Because it comes through you. You are the God figure. When they ask and they have needs, is there somebody who responds as them being a good, valuable person? 3 to 6, initiative versus guilt. This is when they start exploring beyond themselves. You can throw the ball to them, and if they drop it, we can laugh, or you can deride them. They learn here what skills they might have, and your job is to socialize them. Now, I've had people say, well, doesn't a school do that? No, it can in part, but there are several problems with wanting the school to do it. One is, what are the teachers teaching? Yes, but another is this. School is artificial. The rest of your life, will you ever be in a room with people your age only? You're going to be with a wide variety of people of different ages. It's art. It does not prepare you or socialize you. It puts you in a gang, basically, but it doesn't socialize you. Also, it socializes to a degree girls, but not boys, because boys do not learn best by sitting in rows and listening. Boys learn best by movement and example. That's why apprenticeships and sports are so important to boys. I'm watching my 9-year-old and my 7-year-old when they play soccer and basketball, and they will get bumped by somebody, and they will get knocked down, and they'll not. And I'm thinking, and they never turn around like going, "What happened?" No, they've learned in life you get knocked down, and it's not a big deal. You get up and you go. Boys need to learn that in action. Girls can learn that by being told. That's why boys play all games, winners and losers, and a definite end point, and there are rules. Girl games, there are no end points. There are no winners. How do you win playing house or Barbies? I'll never forget when my daughter came in crying, wailing, and there was Barbie, and there was the head, or Ken, and there was the head. She said, he pulled his head off. I said, I'll take care of that girlie, and I'll take care of Duncan. I'll tell him not to do that, and I'll make the frowny face. But I want to ask you, what were you doing? Well, I asked him if he wanted to play with me, and you were playing Barbies. Yes. Did he seem to grow disinterested? Yes. I said, well, boys need a winning and losing, and Ken lost. And that was his ticket out of the game. That's what he's going for. Your job's to socialize him. The checks, I know we do most things online now. All right, let them do that. You don't have to give them the password to get into the account, but show them, here, once you see, here's the bill, pay it. Let them see. It changes things. Let them go with you when you go places. We homeschooled both kids for several years, and it was nothing against traditional school. It was because I was traveling, and I wanted to be with them. But they also got to see other places, listen to other things. My wife's family, she was raised in Colorado, but they're from Texas, and some of them wouldn't even come to our wedding in Colorado because it wasn't in Texas. I'm going, in fact, one of them says, anything I want, I can get in Texas. I'm going, not true. Something non-Texas stuff you have to leave. They can ship it in maybe, but not a wedding. We're at a wedding in Colorado you can't get. They had shut down their ability to socialize. Your kids need to know how to respond to different age groups. I took Duncan when he was 4 years old, 3 and 4 years old. I took him with me on psych rounds in a hospital. That was hilarious, by the way, because I told him, just go get dressed, because that's what guys do. Women lay it out, all right, so it's all proper. He came in. He had big baggy blue shorts on, had a red T-shirt. He was wearing a football helmet, carrying a basketball, and had sandals. I said, you ready? He said, yep. I said, let's go. Because I'm going to say yes instead of no. I'm not going to die on that mountain. He's fine. He's not showing any of his private bets. Let's move. So we rode up, and he wasn't much of a talker. He would just stand there like this. And we did psych rounds, and it was amazing watching people not know if he was real. Because he'd just stand there, not moving. I'm talking to people, and they're afraid to acknowledge his presence. That might mean more medicine. It was fun, but it was socialization. He understood life, death, and dying to the point where when the towers fell, he signed up for the Marine Corps. And he wrote a letter we didn't find until later to his friends, because his friends evidently hated George Bush or thought this is stupid and it's blood for oil. And his response to them was, everybody dies. But not everybody does what they are supposed to do and be born to do and matter before they die. At 17 years old, that's when he wrote it. He turned 18 and shipped out the next day. Proud of him, not just because of being a Marine, but because he knew his path and he took it. And he could articulate to others, this is my plan. This is not a reaction. I've always planned to go in the military. Let's do it now. Initiative. As a kid, take him to church, let him play, bring him around different places, let them see. 6 to 12 years, industry versus inferiority. That's when a child begins to develop some competencies. They get good at some stuff, and they notice that they are good. This is 6 to 12. They notice that they are better at this than another person. And we don't tell them, yeah, you're the best. We tell them, you've got something special here. Work on it. My 9-year-old that's a phenom in basketball, his dad is the coach, and he's my son-in-law. Amazing man, amazing minister of God's word, but he also worked for the Pistons, Detroit Pistons. And he ran basketball camps for the NBA. And he works with Lucas. And he doesn't always say, oh, honey, you were really great. Sometimes he'll say, you weren't under the basket. You're really good at this. Do you want to make sure you're better than the other guy? You need to do it this way. And Lucas will listen because he knows he's not being torn apart. He's being encouraged in something he's good at to even move better, and here's how. It's laid out in front of him. I could go on and on about this, but I can't because of the time. 12 to 19 is where most people fail. The term for it is ego identity versus ego diffusion. Most kids grow into adults who have no idea who they are or why they're here. At all. That's called ego diffusion. You're just part of the crowd. Ego identity, you know who you are, and you make your choices because who you are. This is who I am. It's what I do. The first thing I do when I hire a new person at my church and the first thing I did 5 years ago when I got to that church, I sat down with all the staff and I said, the first thing I say is, no is a spiritual word. Learn to use it. It is also a complete sentence. You don't have to justify it or explain it away. Draw your lines and say, no. If somebody asks you to do something that's not in your core competency or that would wear you out or would mess with you, say no. I'll tell you this story to illustrate it. In Detroit, I had a big staff, and every Christmas I would buy them silly Christmas gifts. One time it was nun puppets, Catholic nun puppets, that had boxing gloves on, and you could move a little lever in, and they'd do this. Stupid stuff. So one time I bought them, everybody, a Bible action figure. All of them were white, which was very surprising, being Jewish people, but all of them, in fact, pasty white. And we laughed, and somebody goes, what if we had an elder in action figure? And then we laughed at that. Then somebody goes, what if we had a Patrick action figure? And I went, uh-oh. And they said, every day it would just disappear and you don't know why. And I laughed and I said, that's right. Because every day almost every day, there'll come a point where I'm going, and I need to be quiet. I need to shut down. And I don't tell everybody, I'm going to be quiet now over here. I just get in my truck and leave. I go be quiet. And nobody's upset because they understand we draw our no. And if I look at my son, for example, and say, you're a leader in the Marine Corps, rifle squad leader, you're a leader in your house, you're a leader in your social group, I would like for you to stand up and teach a Bible class. I know my son will say, no. Why? That's not his core competency. That's not what he does. He's a very quiet leader, and he leads in his own way. I don't tell him, well, we've had ministers in our house, and no. He can say no. With your children, help them learn who they are, and it's very important that they also learn who they are not. That's huge. My daughter swam for the West. Can I tell you another story or two? I know it's 1 o'clock. You can leave if you have to. It's more dramatic if you throw something and yell, I've had it. Anyway, my daughter swam for the West Virginia University swim team, and there were swim meets. And if you've never been to a swim meet, you should thank God, because they go on forever and nothing happens. It's like 82 or 182 heats, and your kid's in 2 of them. And, it's just, anyway. The only fun bit was Cara and all the girls would start a cheer. We're from West Virginia, and we're the best, and you lot are all rubbish. It was probably more poetic than that, but that was the cheer. And then the kids from Maryland would be going, we're from Maryland, we're the best, you lot are all rubbish. And the kids from Pennsylvania, we're the best. The one kid from Rhode Island, do his best. But that was fun. I liked the cheers bit, the little jeering back and forth. That was fun. Well, we also had another meet. Here's the thing about swim meets. They are like ice skating. There's a world absolute, this is the championship every week. So we're in another one. And I'm going, all right, this is boring. And then my daughter and her group saying, we're from West Virginia, we're the best, you lot are all rubbish. And it was dead quiet. They'd made a strategic error. It was an intrastate match. Everybody was from West Virginia. And we used that as an illustration on the way home. And we laughed at it, and we said, it's important to know who you are. It's important to know who you're not. Draw your lines. I know nothing about the man except for his public pronouncements, all right? Let me say that. His public pronouncements make me respect Mike Pence, our vice president. I know nothing about his policies either. What I'm talking about is when he says he never is in a room alone with a woman unless his wife is there. He never gets in a car with a woman unless his wife. He's drawn lines. He was ridiculed for that. And I'm going, that's a sign of ego identity. He has chosen who he is. This is what I do. The world, no, you haven't listened to the loudest voice recently. That's right, because I'm a person. I'm not a pinball. I have a plan. That's what we do with kids. We've only touched the hem of the garment, frankly. But I guess with Jesus, that actually worked, didn't it? Anyway, I'm not Jesus. So maybe we can do more later. You can also email me with questions. I'll do my best. I don't know everything, but I know people. And if I'm able, I will get those answers to you. All right? Do you have anything you need to say before I hit the dusty trail? Leave Kentucky and let you go back to normal life? And email me if you'd like. And again, I thank you. I know it is expensive to bring up a speaker. And you guys went through a location change and all this other. That you would do this matters to me, and I really appreciate it. And that's why I said yes when I could say no. But Justin's pretty persistent. Also, he knows my phone number, so the texts keep coming. I'm going to try to turn it over to you, or just say a prayer and scoot. All right. Our Father in heaven, bless all here. Fill them with your spirit. Give them wisdom and peace. Enrich their lives by making them happy with the person they married and with the children in their life and the parents in their life. Let us be satisfied with the gifts from your hands, and let us put those gifts to work, risking them if necessary, so that they can blossom and grow when you take what we offer and make it more. Thank you for our life, and thank you for making us social creatures with families. In the name of Jesus, amen. Cheery bye.